I have a weird relationship with Rick and Morty. I watched it since the moment I heard about it. I binged every episode as it came out, and I still watch it to this day. And yet I never talk about liking it in public because its fan base has generated it such an unappealing fan base. Sometimes I'll be out in public and I'll see a guy wearing a Rick and Morty shirt, and every time I immediately think less of that person. And that's mean, but that's just sort of a subconscious standard that has been set by all this stuff that happens in the fandom. Earlier this month, a personal friend of mine who goes by the name Renegade Cut released a video essay deconstructing the many themes of Rick and Morty. And I watched that video, and I really agreed with a lot of the things that he had to say. But when it came to why those things matter, I strongly disagreed with him. And so I thought I would make this little video essay discussing the evolution of Rick and Morty as a piece of media and as a cultural phenomenon, as we discuss why I think it has turned out being interpreted so vastly incorrectly. I'm going to be recycling some of Renegade Cut's arguments, so I really suggest you watch his video first. I got the impression that it was somewhat inspired by my video essay on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so I think it's only fair that I take my petty revenge and steal from him as well. So you can watch that before this or after, it really doesn't matter to me. It's going to be in the description, and I'm also going to put it in the last 20 seconds of the video as a pressable button. But before we begin, this video is proudly sponsored by MacWeldon.com. Mac Weldon is an online clothing store that innovates male fashion, allowing for ultimate comfort and ultimate style. I ended up buying a couple things from the store, and I had a really pleasant experience with them. So in terms of what I ordered from Mac Weldon, I got myself a pair of socks, a very nice pair of pants, a really nice shirt, which I got sort of because it's outside of how I usually dress, but it still seemed really nice. And I also got a second pair of pants, which was just a little bit too snug, so I contacted them and they said I could get it replaced. I was very impressed with the clothing. For one, it's really comfortable, it feels just great to wear on your skin, and also, it just looks good. Mac Weldon is the perfect place to get new clothes, and if you use my code Quinton, that's Quinton, you will get 20% off of your order. 20%, that's a big deal! And just in time to order a holiday gift for your friends, your family, or just yourself. Once again, that's MacWeldon.com and code Quinton.
What happened?
Why didn't I realize this before?
What, Doc? What?
Always take the aluminum foil off your burrito before you put it in the microwave.
Rick and Morty originated during the early days of the internet, when Justin Roiland created them as a parody of the characters Doc and Marty McFly from Back to the Future, with their look being poorly sketched spoofs of the duo's designs in Back to the Future the Animated Series. This was done in response to the cease and desist Roiland had received during his poorly aged comedy series, House of Cosby's. The short was essentially him trying to protest copyright law by stealing a beloved set of characters while using them in the most offensive ways you can imagine. However, Roiland quickly fell in love with playing the duo, and hoped that no one would ever discover the obvious connection, be it his eventual bosses when he made this into a show, or the lawyers at Universal. Because of this, many fans have interpreted the plot and characterizations of Rick and Morty to be a direct parody of Doc and Marty. This is incorrect. Rick and Morty is a parody not of Back to the Future, but instead of Doctor Who. Yes, this is going to partially be a Doctor Who analysis, which I know is everyone's favorite thing. But to me, it would be totally wrong to not do this. Because being the total antithesis to Doctor Who was basically Rick and Morty's entire goal from the start. Trying to analyze the existence of Rick and Morty without this explicit context would be the equivalent of doing a Spaceballs video essay while trying to pretend that it was the first space opera movie ever made. Doctor Who is a television show that has run for 56 years off and on, and it's primarily built up a sort of status quo that most writers tend to stick to. The Doctor forms a deep and personal bond with their companion, and the group will end up going across the universe with one simple goal in mind: to see the stars and every single world they can. Of course, week after week, they find themselves caught into trouble, almost every time by pure coincidence, and they have to fight to make sure that everything is right and just in every single place. It's not a show about time travel, really, but instead time travel is just the tool used to get from one dystopian planet to another so they can face a new enemy every single week. This is, of course, unless you're watching the Russell T Davies era, where almost every episode is set on Earth in different time periods. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I forgot about New Earth. Yeah, what a good alien planet. Rick and Morty is written with the exact same setup, except the motivations of the character and how he reacts to having these adventures is totally flipped. The Doctor sees the universe out of love and a desire to help others. Rick sees his ability to travel equally freely as something to use for his own personal, selfish gain. The Doctor's companions' journeys with him are almost depicted as whimsical. They feel chosen to have the chance to do what they do. Meanwhile, Morty's role in the adventures are depicted from day one to be the opposite of this. He's literally being chosen to do dangerous parts of the adventures, and often complains that he never has fun on Rick's clock. In lieu of the kindness that the Doctor imparts onto everyone he meets, Rick is an abusive and vindictive asshole who treats everyone, especially Morty, like actual human garbage. The most interesting aspect of the Doctor as a character, which few people ever talk about, is the fact that she didn't always used to be this happy-go-lucky adventurous space wizard who wanted to see how the stars shimmered slightly differently from every planet. At the start, they were quite the opposite of that. The Doctor, as he was presented in the first few stories of the 1963 run of the show, was arguably pretty similar to the version of Rick Sanchez that we would know to exist within the modern Rick and Morty. The Doctor and his granddaughter had been exiled from their home planet and had gone on the run in their time ship. When he first meets Ian and Barbara, Susan's teachers, he curses that their knowledge of the ship being on Earth means that they have to leave, and then essentially kidnaps the two teachers pretty much entirely out of spite. But one of the most important moments that very few people comment on happened later in that same opening serial. The Doctor and his forced companions have been taken hostage by a tribe of ancient cave-dwelling humans, and are trying desperately to escape back to the TARDIS, when one of the cavemen is wounded by a wild animal. Everyone but the Doctor insists that it's their duty to try and help him. The Doctor, frustrated that this is getting in the way of their chance to escape, steps to the side and picks up a large rock.
What are you doing?
Well, I was going to get him to draw our way back to the TARDIS.
The clear implication in the narrative is that the Doctor was contemplating committing murder to make their getaway slightly easier. And the fact that he has no issue doing this is somewhat consistent to his lifestyle as presented in these stories. He has no real home, nothing but a broken time ship that randomly generates wherever and whenever they land next. And he isn't really traveling with the motivation of it being fun in any perceivable way. Not only is it improbable for him to ever meet the same person more than once, it would be rare for him to land on the same planet in the same century more than once. The exception is Historical Earth, because they land there like every other episode. Because of this, there are no consequences for his actions. He can do and act however he pleases, as long as he can get back to his ship at the end of the story and leave with all of his limbs intact. The slow journey over the first season of the show is essentially him learning to see traveling in space and time the same way that Ian and Barbara do, something which helps the group grow as a family despite how rocky their relationship started out. It feels like a satisfying progression, as the character becomes pretty much what everyone accepts her to be in the present day. It's often been said, especially by new series writers, that the Doctor travels with companions because when they don't, it's harder for them to hold the same understanding of the importance of life and the universe as they randomly travel from one place to the next.
See, this is what happens when you travel alone for too long.
But even in this small point, Rick and Morty goes out of its way to have a much more cynical take on featuring the exact same story element. Instead of saying that it's set up this way because traveling with a mortal character makes him more human, or that the pair have a deep bond that gives Rick satisfaction during his adventures, he has entirely upfront and malicious motivations. as traveling with Morty cloaks his brainwaves and makes his crimes easier to commit. Rick and Morty is almost like an exercise in what would have happened if the Doctor had developed in the complete opposite way. Rick holds one philosophy: abstract nihilism. He has access in his pocket to every reality of every planet that has ever existed, and having that for decades while never staying in one place too long has left him numb to the importance of anything or the consequences of his actions. This was even true of his life on Earth, explaining Beth's abandonment issues during the early seasons. Committing several murders almost becomes his morning routine, and he's learned to deal with having to do this as something that just makes his day slightly more convenient. Another aspect we have to keep in mind is that a lot of how Rick and Morty presents these stories is based around the fact that the show is a rare example of a modern subversive sitcom that still stays consistent to the existence of the status quo. I realize I've done numerous video essays discussing how different sitcoms address or use the status quo to their advantage, and that's because almost every good sitcom has something to say on the topic. In the case of Rick and Morty, the characters view nihilism and nothing ever truly mattering as some inherent logic to the universe, partially because that's just something that's going to be true of any show where every episode has to start the same. One of the most memorable scenes in any episode has been where Summer has grown upset at how their parents are treating her, leading her to question if they would have been happier without her. And Morty describes to her a storyline from weeks before, where he and Rick chose to evacuate their reality upon it being destroyed, and found a world where they had died moments before, essentially replacing themselves. The show uses bringing this up as a piece of continuity, as a meta way for Summer to understand that the only solution for these characters is to tune all of this out, and to just choose not to care, to accept the continuous status quo, because that's how sitcoms work. Almost every theme that Rick and Morty approaches, it does so either to make a point about its long-standing genre, or to just do the opposite of whatever we expect them to. One of the most memorable moments in autoerotic assimilation is when Morty and Summer are briefly disturbed at Unity's possession of an entire planet's civilization, until they reveal that all of the people on the planet are absolute monsters, and that her possessing them and making them not exist actually makes everything better.
Unity, I am so sorry. I didn't know freedom meant people doing stuff that sucks.
If this were a reveal in any other sci-fi show, this would be insultingly and extraordinarily poorly written, and also kind of fashy, like overtly fashy. But Rick and Morty isn't a sci-fi show. It's a parody of better sci-fi shows. It exists parallel to them, and that aspect is its main defining factor. The issue is that a lot of people, arguably even the showrunners at times, have totally forgotten this. Rick and Morty has become one of the most recognizable and worshipped pieces of media in its genre, to the extent that people don't really see it as a parody of Back to the Future or Doctor Who or anything else anymore. They see it as just itself, Rick and Morty. And that should be fine if it wasn't for the fact that this happening has led to a strange culture where people have forgotten that Rick is not really a protagonist. He's an anti-protagonist made to be the direct opposite of actual good main characters. And the worst part is that despite being made as the worst person imaginable as an inverse to similar leading men, Rick shares one thing among them. He's very smart. Not in anything he really says. I can never think of him actually ever having a smart thing that comes out of his mouth. His hot take about the Israel-Palestine conflict is that he's afraid to have an opinion. But he builds gadgets, and sometimes he breaks the fourth wall, and that gives him a green card to claim to everyone, and especially the audience, that he is a hyper-genius. The worst aspect of this show is that it gives an association between being cruel to everyone around you and being smart, as if one causes the other. And that's not just something you can potentially draw out of how the show is written every week. It's literally something Rick consistently insists to be the show's main theme.
Listen, I'm not the nicest guy in the universe, because I'm the smartest, and being nice is something stupid people do to hedge their bets.
This is where I start borrowing heavily from Renegade Cut's video, which I do suggest you watch when this one is over if you haven't yet. The choice of the show to have Rick's cruelness be caused by how smart he is an unfortunate side effect of just how the show is written. Morty is meant to be the audience's surrogate, and essentially on every adventure he argues for moral virtues and basically what we would expect to happen in an episode of Doctor Who. And of course, if the show actually stuck to those suggestions, it wouldn't be very edgy or subversive. So Morty has to always be shown to be wrong for having empathy, while Rick is shown to be right for having no regard for sentient life. Rick being cruel makes him seem smart exclusively in the reality of a TV show trying to depict everyone and everything as inherently vindictive. It has nothing to do with the real world or even the reality of a show not written to be an overt parody. But this is a nuance that doesn't come across in the numerous scenes where Rick insists that he is a dick because that's just a quality that people who are right happen to have.
Am I evil?
Worse, you're smart. When you know nothing matters, the universe is yours, and I've never met a universe that was into it.
The issue is that all of these themes were added to the show as an inherent joke, but when it went mainstream and started trying to get all scholarly, it also wanted to act as if these elements were actually valuable. The truth is that Rick isn't smart, but his universe exists to make him seem right, and thus he comes across as smart. And of course, some younger audience members will fail to see the irony in many of the things that he does and or says. And even when he's shown to be morally in the wrong, they'll believe that he's only in that situation because he cares about facts and not feelings. For God's sakes, people, Rick just wants to grill! Rick's nihilism and the failure of anything in the universe to matter was an extremely funny joke at first, but given that this show is currently tracked to last for at least 100 episodes, and potentially up to 10 more years of television, I think it's about time that it starts doing something, anything really, to make more interesting points about the topics that it chooses to cover. It needs to become a program that has more to say at the end of the day than just, nothing matters, come watch TV. So, that is the end of the video essay. So now that that's over, how about you head over to MacWeldon.com now to check out their great range of adult male clothing. The perfect gift for the season, no matter if the recipient is someone you know or just yourself. And if you use the code Quinton at checkout, you'll get 20% off automatically. That's 20%! And I guess I can understand how some of you wouldn't be interested in that, because, to be fair, you have to have a high IQ to understand how great a deal this is. Once again, that's MacWeldon.com and the code Quinton. Okay, and now you've reached the video's Patreon crawl. Maybe it's a crawl under black, maybe there's a really ugly photo of me under there, which basically means any photo. I'm not too sure because I actually didn't edit this one. This video was edited by the Tom5000, who did the video on very short notice. I've decided to take on a few more editors this year so I can just see how much content I can really get out before January, because I plan on taking a little bit of a break after January to recoup, really. Also, as a big announcement, I know this video has no breaks at this point, but my birthday is December the 7th, and I'll be turning 23, so starting today and ending December the 7th, I'll be giving you guys a little gift. If you sign up to my Patreon for any tier $5 or up, I'll personally send you a postcard as a thanks for helping me out. And if you already support me on Patreon, upgrading to a higher pledge will also get you on this list. I'm going to be moving to a better apartment near Christmas, and I also probably need to get a new editing computer since my current one is about to die on me. So any support like this really goes a long way in not only supporting the channel, but helping me, stay afloat. Additionally, I also got my hands on these cute little Frasier postcards, which I really love. They're so cute, but I don't have too many of these. So you gotta act fast. You gotta be quick. You gotta sign up right away if you want a Frasier postcard, or else you're gonna miss this chance. So with that, I've been Quinton Reviews, and that's all you need.